My parents told me I was not invited to my brother's wedding after I gifted him a house worth $770,000. So, while 200 guests celebrated inside my property, I sold it. Then the bride's mother discovered who truly owned the house, and the entire reception fell silent. The air conditioning in my car was running on low, humming a steady, quiet rhythm that contrasted sharply with the chaotic pounding of my own heart. I was parked exactly 200 yards down the street from 4142 Maplewood Drive. My hands were gripping the leather steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles had turned completely white. It was the 15th of June, a Saturday. The weather was one of those perfect, balmy summer evenings where the sky turns a deep, bruised purple just before the stars come out. But I wasn't looking at the sky. I was staring straight ahead, through the windshield, at the property I owned. The neighborhood was an exclusive, gated-style community where the houses sat far back from the street, surrounded by ancient, towering oak trees and manicured lawns that looked like velvet. And tonight, my house, the house I had purchased with my own blood, sweat, and tears, was the absolute center of attention. From my vantage point in the shadows, I had a perfect view of the driveway and the front lawn. It looked less like a residential home and more like a red carpet event in Hollywood. A valet service, hired specifically for the night, was busy parking a staggering parade of luxury vehicles. I watched as a pristine, snow-white Rolls-Royce glided up to the curb, its silver hood ornament catching the warm glow of the streetlights. Right behind it was a sleek, aggressive black Lamborghini, its engine purring with suppressed power. Across the street, a cherry-red Ferrari was parked diagonally, taking up 2 spaces because the owner clearly didn't care about neighborhood etiquette. A silver Porsche 911 sat right by the front walkway. These weren't just cars. They were declarations of wealth. They belonged to the family of the bride, Camille, and their extensive network of high society friends, corporate executives, and generational trust fund kids. They were all here to celebrate the union of Camille and my older brother, Preston. The house itself had been transformed into a glowing palace. Hundreds of delicate, warm white string lights were draped through the branches of the oak trees and woven along the expensive wrought iron fencing I had paid to install just a year ago. Massive, ornate lanterns lined the stone pathway leading up to the heavy mahogany double doors. Through the massive bay windows, I could see the warm, golden light spilling out onto the lawn. I rolled my window down just a fraction of an inch, letting the heavy summer air slip into the cabin. Instantly, the sounds of the celebration washed over me. I could hear the crisp, lively notes of a professional live jazz quartet playing on the back patio. I could hear the clinking of crystal champagne flutes. I could hear the booming, generous laughter of 200 guests who were thoroughly enjoying themselves. They were eating prime rib, drinking top-shelf liquor, and marveling at the gorgeous estate that the groom had supposedly provided for his new bride. They believed they were standing in the home of a highly successful, self-made man who came from a loving, supportive, tight-knit family. They were celebrating on hardwood floors that I had personally picked out and paid for. They were leaning against a custom marble kitchen island that my money had financed. They were using bathrooms I had renovated. And I, the legal owner of every single brick, every blade of grass, and every inch of that property, was sitting in a dark car on a public street, explicitly banned from attending. I looked down at the center console. My phone was sitting there, its screen glowing in the dark cabin. On the screen was my email application. I had a single draft open. The recipients were set: Preston's personal email, my father Conrad's email, and Camille's email. Attached to this draft were 3 specific PDF documents. One was a legally binding bill of sale, finalized and recorded by the county. The second was a copy of the property deed, displaying my name and my name only. The third was a formal, legally ironclad 30-day notice of eviction drawn up by one of the most ruthless real estate attorneys in the state. All I had to do was pick up the phone, press my right thumb against the small blue, send arrow, and the beautiful, expensive fairy tale happening 200 yards away would violently and irreparably shatter into a million unfixable pieces. I stared at the phone. A normal person might feel a rush of adrenaline. A normal person might be shaking with rage or sweating with the anxiety of what they were about to do. But I felt none of that. My chest felt hollow. It felt like a cold, heavy block of solid ice had settled right behind my ribs. I watched the silhouettes of the people inside the house moving past the windows. People who shared my blood. People who were supposed to protect me, love me, and stand by my side. How does a family get to this point? How does a brother become a complete stranger? How does a father become an enemy so toxic that you have to use a lawyer to speak to him? To understand why I was sitting in the shadows, ready to press a button that would destroy the biggest night of my brother's life, and to fully understand why he absolutely, unequivocally deserved every single second of the nightmare that was about to hit him, you have to know the truth. You have to know the history of the Whitlock family. You have to know that the luxury, the smiles, the toasts, and the flawless image my father and brother projected to that wealthy bride were built on a massive, rotting mountain of lies. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully erased me from the narrative, taken my money, and kept the prize. But what they didn't know, what no one in that 200-person reception knew, was that the roof over their heads still had my name on the deed, and I had just signed it away to a corporate buyer. Before I push this button, I need to take you back. Not a few months, not a couple of years. I need to take you back exactly 17 years, to a cold, miserable Tuesday in October. Because that was the day my mother took her last breath. That was the day the only real parent I ever had disappeared from the earth, and the heavy metal door of my childhood slammed shut forever, locking me outside in the cold. My mother, Evelyn, was 38 years old when she died. It was ovarian cancer. It was fast. It was ruthless, and it stripped the life from the most vibrant, fiercely loving woman I had ever known. Before she got sick, she was the absolute anchor of our home. She was the gravity that kept our family from flying apart. More importantly, she was the only one who enforced fairness in a house governed by a man who didn't understand the word. If Preston got a new pair of expensive baseball cleats for his season, my mother made sure I got the new basketball shoes I had been staring at in the store window. If Preston got an hour of help with his history project, I got an hour of help with my algebra homework. She didn't believe in the concept of a golden child. She didn't play favorites. She believed a house could only stand if the foundation was even. But when she got sick, that foundation started to crack. When she passed away, it completely collapsed. I was 14 years old. I remember the funeral with a vivid, agonizing clarity. The sky was the color of bruised iron, heavy and gray, threatening rain but never quite breaking. The air smelled intensely of wet dirt, crushed grass, and those cheap, overpowering lilies they put in funeral homes. I stood at the edge of the open grave, shivering, not just from the cold wind, but from a deep, bone-rattling shock. I was wearing a black suit that was a size too big, the sleeves hanging past my wrists. My father, Conrad, stood on the opposite side of the casket. He didn't look at me once, not a single glance. Instead, he had his heavy, thick arm wrapped tightly around Preston's shoulders. Preston was 16 at the time, already built like a high school linebacker, taller than our dad. Preston was staring at the ground, tears silently streaming down his face. As the pastor finished his final prayer, Conrad pulled Preston tight against his side. He didn't whisper. He spoke loudly, ensuring that all the aunts, uncles, and family friends gathered around could hear his declaration. "You're the man of the house now, son," Conrad said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's just you and me against the world now. You're my right hand." I was standing 3 feet away, 14 years old, completely shattered, and completely invisible. No one stepped toward me. No one patted my shoulder. Except for one person, Helena. She was my mother's best friend since college. A sharp-tongued, fiercely independent, no-nonsense real estate agent who always told it straight. She saw what was happening. She broke away from the crowd, knelt down right in the damp grass, completely ruining her expensive black stockings, and gripped my hands tight. Her eyes were red and puffy, but her voice was as steady as a rock. "I promised your mother I'd always have your back, Everett," she whispered fiercely, looking me dead in the eyes. I promised her I would watch out for you. Don't you ever forget that. You are not alone. I didn't understand the legal and financial weight of her words at the time. I was just a grieving kid. I didn't know that in her final, agonizing weeks in hospice care, my mother had secretly signed legal paperwork making Helena my godmother. My mother wasn't naive. She knew exactly what Conrad was. She knew exactly what he would do to me once she wasn't around to act as a human shield. The shift in the house dynamics was immediate and brutal. The day after we buried her, our home formally split down the middle into two entirely different universes. Preston's universe was paved with gold. My universe was paved with whatever scraps accidentally fell off the table. When Preston turned 17, a pristine, aggressively polished used Ford Mustang suddenly appeared in the driveway. Conrad tossed him the keys with a massive, proud grin, clapping him on the back. "For my boy," he declared. 2 weeks later, I walked into the living room. Conrad was sitting in his recliner, drinking a beer and watching a football game. I stood nervously by the coffee table. "Dad," I started, keeping my voice low, "I need $40 for the required reading books for my sophomore English class. The teacher said we need them by Monday." Conrad didn't take his eyes off the television screen. He took a slow sip of his beer, swallowed, and waved his hand dismissively. "Ask your brother. I already gave him the household budget for the week. He's managing the finances to learn responsibility." I didn't ask Preston. I knew exactly how that would go. 2 days earlier, I had knocked on Preston's bedroom door at 5 in the morning. I had an interview for an academic scholarship across town, my only ticket out of that house, and the city bus didn't run that early on weekends. "Preston," I had whispered through the crack in the door, "can I borrow the Mustang for just 2 hours? I have that scholarship interview. I'll put gas in it." Preston rolled over in his warm bed, pulling the thick comforter up to his chin. He didn't even open his eyes. "Take the bus, loser. Not my problem. Shut the door, you're letting the cold air in." I walked 3 miles in the freezing pre-dawn rain to make that interview. My shoes were soaked. My slacks were ruined. But I got the scholarship. And I also got a job. The week I turned 16, I started working at a greasy diner that operated around the clock out on the highway. I worked 4:30 in the morning shifts before the school bell rang. I wiped down sticky tables, mopped floors smelling of bleach and old coffee, and served breakfast to exhausted truck drivers. I bought my own school clothes. I bought my own calculators. I paid for my own winter coat when the zipper on my old one completely broke off in January, and neither my father nor my brother even noticed I was shivering. I became a ghost in my own house, slipping silently through the hallways while Conrad and Preston loudly bonded over sports, expensive steaks, and the endless stream of cash Conrad handed out. But the deepest knife twist, the ultimate betrayal, came later. When I was 18, just weeks away from leaving for college, Helena called me. She told me to come to her house immediately. When I walked into her kitchen, she was sitting at the table with a thick manila folder. She looked furious. "Sit down, Everett," she commanded. She opened the folder and slid a stack of official bank records across the wood. "Your mother wasn't stupid," Helena said, her jaw tight, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "She knew your father favored Preston. She knew it in her bones. Before she died, she set up a dedicated college fund for you. A secure account. An inheritance, essentially, meant purely for your education. It was exactly equal to what Preston had in his." I stared at the black and white numbers on the page. My name was at the top. The balance at the bottom was 0. "Where is it?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Your father," Helena said, slamming her hand on the table. "He was listed as the legal custodian of the accounts until you turned 18. 2 months after she died. Everett. 2 months. He drained your college fund. Every single penny. He transferred it entirely into Preston's account. He bought Preston's Mustang with your mother's money. He paid for Preston's private golf lessons with your future. I drove home like a madman. I burst into the living room. Conrad was sitting in his usual spot, feet up, I stood directly in front of the TV, blocking the screen, clutching the bank statements in my shaking hands. "You stole my money," I said, my voice eerily calm despite the fire in my chest. "Mom left that for me. That was my college fund." Conrad slowly lowered his beer. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look ashamed. He looked incredibly annoyed that I was interrupting his game. "I reallocated family resources," he said smoothly, completely unfazed. "Preston has a real future in business. He needs the financial backing and the image. You're smart, you're a survivor. You can figure it out on your own with those little scholarships of yours. It's for the good of the family name. Now move, it's third down." The next morning, I packed everything I owned into 2 faded duffel bags. I walked out into the living room. Conrad was reading the morning newspaper. "I'm leaving," I said. He didn't look up from the sports page. He didn't ask where I was going. He just flipped the page and said, "Lock the door on your way out." 10 years passed. A decade of grinding, brutal work. I built my life from absolute rock bottom. I got my real estate license while working nights at a bar. I worked 80-hour weeks. I studied the market obsessively. I climbed the ladder rung by bleeding rung. By the time I was 28, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. I earned a massive promotion at a top-tier brokerage. My salary was deep into the 6 figures. I had a beautiful penthouse apartment downtown, a solid, diversified investment portfolio, and a life I had built entirely with my own 2 hands. I never asked Conrad for a dime. I never called him for holidays. He never called me for birthdays. I thought the past was dead, buried under layers of success and therapy. Then, on a random Thursday afternoon, his name flashed on my phone screen, and like a desperate, foolish child still craving a drop of water in a barren desert, I pressed answer. Everett. Just my name. That was the entirety of his greeting. No hello. No, how have you been these past 10 years? No acknowledgement whatsoever that an entire decade had evaporated since the morning he told me to lock the door and walk out of his life. Hearing his voice, that deep, gravelly, authoritative baritone, instantly transported me back to being a terrified teenager standing in his living room. I was sitting in my corner office, looking out over the city skyline. I gripped the edge of my mahogany desk. "What do you want, Dad?" "Your brother needs a place," Conrad stated. He didn't ask. He announced it as a fact that required my immediate action. "He's getting very serious with a girl. Camille Beaumont. Good family. Extremely wealthy family. Old money. He can't be bringing a girl of her status back to some rented, cramped apartment downtown. It makes him look weak. It makes us look bad. Help him out. Help him out." Like I was the family handyman being called in to fix a leaky faucet. Like I hadn't spent the last 10 years clawing my way out of the poverty he intentionally abandoned me in. I should have hung up the phone. I should have laughed out loud, told him to go straight to hell, and blocked his number forever. But human psychology is a twisted, pathetic thing. Deep down, beneath the expensive tailored suits, the luxury watches, and the undeniable professional success, there was still a 14-year-old boy standing at a gravesite, desperately waiting for his father to put an arm around him. A toxic, deeply ingrained part of my brain whispered a dangerous lie. If you do this, if you solve this massive, expensive problem for them, they will finally respect you. They will finally see you as an equal. You will finally earn your place at the table. "I'll look into the market and see what's available," I heard myself say. My voice sounded detached, like someone else was speaking. Within 2 weeks, I found the perfect house. It was a stunning, sprawling 4-bedroom colonial property in Maplewood, one of the most highly sought-after, prestigious suburbs in the metropolitan area. It had a massive, private backyard, a newly renovated chef's kitchen with quartz countertops, and a 3-car garage. The asking price was $770,000. Because of my connections and my capital, I bought it in cash, closing the deal in record time. When I sat down with Helena at our favorite coffee shop and told her my plan, she nearly dropped her ceramic mug. She stared at me across the small table, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and profound disappointment. She looked at me the way you look at a person knowingly walking into oncoming traffic. You are buying his love, Everett, Helena said, her voice sharp, cutting right through the ambient noise of the cafe. It doesn't work that way. You can't purchase a family. A parasite doesn't fall in love with the host just because the blood tastes good. They will take this house, and they will still treat you like garbage. It's just an investment, Helena. I lied, unable to meet her gaze. I stirred my black coffee defensively. Property values in Maplewood are skyrocketing. I'm helping my brother get on his feet, and I hold an appreciating asset. It's just business. She slammed her hand flat on the table, making the spoons rattle. Fine, but you listen to me very carefully, and you do not deviate from this. Do not, under any circumstances, put Preston's name or Conrad's name on that paperwork. You keep the deed solely in your name. You maintain absolute legal control. Promise me, Everett. I promise, I said softly. Looking back, listening to Helena was the single smartest thing I did in my entire adult life. Preston moved into the Colonial a week later. I met him in the driveway to hand over the keys. He walked through the front door, looking around at the vaulted ceilings and the gleaming hardwood floors. He didn't ask whose name was on the deed. He didn't ask about the mortgage or the property taxes. He just snatched the keys from my hand, gave me a hard pat on the shoulder, and smiled a brilliant, practiced smile. Thanks, little bro, he said smoothly. This is perfect. I owe you one big time. He didn't owe me one. He owed me absolutely everything. And as the months ticked by, it became violently clear that he planned on paying me back with nothing but absolute erasure. The freeze-out didn't happen overnight. It was strategic. It started so slowly, so subtly, that I found myself making pathetic excuses for it. Thanksgiving rolled around, the first holiday since he moved into the house. I called Preston a week prior, asking what time I should bring the wine and the turkey. Oh man, I'm so sorry, Preston said, his voice dripping with fake regret over the phone. Camille's entire extended family decided to fly in this year. Her parents, her aunts, her cousins. The house is going to be completely packed. We literally don't have enough chairs for everyone to sit down. It's going to be a madhouse. Let's definitely catch up next time. Okay? Maybe grab a beer. Next time. Christmas arrived a month later. I didn't even bother calling. I just sent a text asking what the plans were. We're heading up to the Beaumont's private ski lodge in Aspen this year. Preston texted back. Just me, Camille, and Dad. Doing the whole winter wonderland thing. Catch you in the new year, bro. I spent Christmas Day eating lukewarm Chinese takeout alone in my penthouse apartment, watching snow fall against the glass. My own father and brother were opening expensive presents and drinking hot cocoa with complete strangers, while the $770,000 house I bought for them sat empty and dark. The excuses kept piling up like snowdrifts. Birthdays, summer barbecues, random weekends. There was always a highly plausible, carefully constructed reason why I couldn't come over. I was being systematically, surgically edited out of the picture. Preston was performing the role of a lifetime for Camille and her wealthy, status-obsessed parents. He was playing the highly successful, independent young executive who came from a small, tight-knit, respectable family. I did not fit that narrative. A younger brother who had actually paid for the roof over his head would completely shatter the illusion of his dominance and success. The first real, terrifying alarm bell rang on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was at my office when my private line buzzed. It was Marin, a senior paralegal at a prominent downtown law firm. We had worked together on dozens of complex commercial real estate transactions. She was sharp, discreet, and a good friend. Everett, I need to tell you something completely off the record, she said, her voice hushed, clearly speaking from a private hallway. Someone matching your brother's exact description, name, age, appearance, came into our firm yesterday for a private consultation with our senior partner. My stomach tightened instinctively. A consultation for what, Marin? He was asking extremely specific questions about adverse possession. The room seemed to tilt. Adverse possession. It's an obscure but very real concept in real estate law. If someone occupies a piece of property openly, continuously, and exclusively for a certain number of years without the legal owner's explicit permission, they can eventually petition the court to legally steal the title. It takes years to establish, and the legal hurdles are massive, but the intent was crystal clear. He was asking the partner how long it takes to claim legal ownership of a residential property if the actual owner doesn't live there and doesn't explicitly collect rent. Marin whispered. I thanked her, hung up the phone, and stared blankly at the sprawling city below my window. My brother wasn't just enjoying my generosity. He wasn't just using my house to impress his wealthy girlfriend. He was actively, maliciously plotting to steal a nearly $1 million asset from me behind my back. He wanted to legally erase my ownership, just like he had erased me from the family holiday dinners. The lingering hurt and the pathetic desire for their love slowly mutated. It hardened into a cold, heavy, unbreakable anger. He didn't just want me out of his life. He wanted to take my kindness, weaponize it, and mount it on his wall as a trophy. But the final insult, the absolute point of no return that would set the stage for total war, was still to come. The final explosion didn't start with a bang. It started with a simple text message from Reed. Reed had been my best friend since we were freshmen in high school. He was a loud, fiercely loyal guy who had eaten dinner at my house enough times to know exactly how toxic, manipulative, and broken my family dynamic was. He was the only person besides Helena who knew the whole truth. I was at the gym when my phone lit up with his message. Hey man, just got the heavy cream cardstock in the mail. Gold embossing, very fancy. You doing a best man speech or what? Let me know so I can prepare my heckling material. I stopped on the treadmill, staring at the screen. Sweat dripped down my forehead. Speech for what? I typed back. Preston's wedding. Don't play dumb with me. June 15th. Open bar, right? My blood ran completely cold. I stepped off the machine and immediately hit Reed's contact to call him. He picked up on the first ring, laughing. I didn't get an invite, Reed, I said, my voice totally flat. The laughter on the other end of the line died instantly. Reed went dead silent. Everett, are you serious? The wedding is in exactly 2 weeks. It's a massive event. The invitation says 200 guests. And bro, the reception location printed on the card. It's at your house. 4142 Maplewood Drive. I didn't even say goodbye. I hung up the phone, walked straight to the locker room, and dialed Preston's number. It went straight to voicemail. I dialed again. Voicemail. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing with a furious, shaking energy. I just heard about the wedding. From Reed. Am I not invited to my own brother's wedding? The wedding taking place in MY House? I waited. I watched the 3 little gray typing bubbles appear, disappear, and appear again. He was carefully crafting his lie. Finally, 10 agonizing minutes later, his response came through. Everett, look, the guest list is super tight. Camille's family has a lot of important corporate connections and politicians attending. We had to make some really hard cuts to keep the numbers down. It's only for the closest family. Don't make this a drama about you. Be happy for me. I read the words again, my vision blurring with pure rage. Hard cuts. Closest family. I was his biological brother. I bought the ground he was standing on. And I was a hard cut. The wedding is at MY House, Preston, I texted back. You are hosting 200 people on my property without asking me. His response was instant, dripping with the kind of arrogant entitlement that made me want to punch a hole through the wall. Then it's been my house for 2 years. Everyone knows that. Just let it go and don't ruin this for me. I threw my phone into my gym bag. The sheer audacity. The absolute, breathtaking disrespect. I drove home in a daze, walked into my apartment, and immediately called my father. Conrad picked up on the 3rd ring. He sounded annoyed. The sound of a golf tournament playing loudly in the background. What is it, Everett? I'm busy watching the Masters. Dad, I said, my voice tight. Preston is having a 200-person wedding at my house in 2 weeks, and I'm not invited. Did you know about this? Of course I knew, Conrad said calmly. not even bothering to lower the volume of the TV. It's his wedding, his rules. Her family is paying a fortune for the catering and the band. They want their people there. They don't know you. It's my house, I yelled, losing my composure, my voice cracking, echoing off my apartment walls. I paid for it. I bought it for him with my own money. Oh, stop being so dramatic, Conrad scoffed, a sneer evident in his voice. You let him live there. It's basically his now. He's maintained it. Stop trying to ruin his big day with your petty jealousy. You always do this. You always try to make yourself the victim. You'll be fine. You always are. You always are. That was it. That was his justification for a lifetime of neglect and abuse. Because I survived, because I didn't break under the weight of his cruelty, he felt permitted to keep crushing me. My resilience was his free pass to be a monster. You're a coward, Dad, I whispered, and hung up the phone. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. Hi Everett, this is Camille. Preston told me you are harassing him about the wedding arrangements. I understand you feel left out, but we appreciate the house. But please don't use it as leverage to force your way into an intimate family event. We need positive energy right now. Please respect our boundaries. I stared at the screen, my jaw clenched so hard my teeth ground together. Intimate family event. Leverage. Preston had completely poisoned the well. He had painted me as the bitter, estranged, manipulative younger brother trying to ruin his perfect life by dangling a house over his head. I needed to see exactly what kind of lie he was selling to her and her family. I opened Instagram. I had unfollowed Preston a year ago for my own mental peace, but his profile was public. I scrolled through his feed, a sickening feeling rising in my throat. It was a masterclass in psychological erasure. Every single family photo from the past 10 years had been meticulously curated. He had used Photoshop to crop me out of group shots. Photos of Thanksgiving dinners, Christmas mornings, even a wide shot of my mother's memorial service. In every image, I was simply gone. Erased. Then I found a photo posted a month ago. Preston, Camille, Conrad, and Camille's parents. A stern-looking woman named Vivian and her husband, standing in the newly renovated kitchen of the house I bought. They were all holding up expensive glasses of red wine, smiling brilliantly. The caption read, "Celebrating our engagement in the beautiful home my amazing dad bought for us. So lucky to be his only child. Family is absolutely everything." I stared at the words, "Only child. Dad bought for us." I scrolled down to the comments. Camille's mother, Vivian, had commented, "Such a generous gift from a wonderful father-in-law. We love you both." Preston had replied, "Dad has always taken care of me. Just us two." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The hollow ache that had lived in my chest for 17 years simply vanished. It evaporated, replaced by a razor-sharp, freezing, absolute clarity. He didn't just want my house. He wanted my entire existence wiped from the face of the earth, while he stood on my property and let our father take the credit. I sat at my computer. I took high-resolution screenshots of everything. Every lie on Instagram, every cropped photo, every text message between me, Preston, and Camille. I put them in a secure, encrypted folder. Then, I picked up my keys and drove straight to the downtown law office of Sterling Radcliffe. Anthony was a ruthless, brilliant shark of a real estate lawyer. He wore suits that cost more than most people's cars, charged $800 an hour, and he was worth every single penny. I walked into his office, bypassed his secretary, and dropped the heavy manila folder onto his mahogany desk. Inside was the deed, the bank wire transfers, and the property tax receipts showing I had paid every dime. "I need to sell a house," I said, my voice dead calm. "Immediately, quietly. And I need the current occupants legally removed." Anthony adjusted his expensive reading glasses and reviewed the paperwork for 5 minutes in silence. He looked up, his eyes sharp. "Is there a lease agreement? A verbal rental contract? Any written correspondence promising your brother equity or long-term tenancy?" "Nothing," I said. "He pays absolutely no rent." I pay the property taxes. He has no legal standing whatsoever. Under the law, he is nothing more than a long-term guest. Anthony smiled. It was a terrifying, predatory smile. Then you possess absolute, unmitigated power. Everett. The market is incredibly hot right now. I have a corporate buyer, an all-cash holding company out of Delaware, looking for premium rental properties in that exact neighborhood. They waive inspections. We can close this in 10 days. Clean, fast, brutal sale. Do it, I said without hesitation. But I have one condition. I want the closing date to be exactly June 14th. Anthony raised an eyebrow, looking at his calendar. The day before the wedding? Exactly, I said. He wanted a family without me in it. He wanted an only child narrative. Fine, I am going to give him exactly that. But he is not going to do it in my house. That brings us back to the car. To the dark, humid street. To the evening of June 15th. The transaction had executed flawlessly. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon the day before, the title agency had recorded the transfer. The substantial sale proceeds, minus legal fees, title charges, and closing costs, were sitting safely and irrevocably in my high-yield savings account. Legally, the house on Maplewood Drive now belonged to a faceless corporate entity based out of a post office box in Delaware. As a condition of the sale, the buyer had authorized Sterling Radcliffe to deliver a formal notice terminating Preston's right to occupy the property. Preston had no idea. Conrad had no idea. Camille's wealthy, arrogant family had no idea. They were currently drinking top-tier champagne and dancing inside a house that Preston no longer had any authority to present as his own. My phone buzzed loudly on the passenger seat, vibrating against the leather. It was a text from Reed. He was my man on the inside, sitting at table number 4, deep in the belly of the beast. Reed, they're starting the speeches. The bride's mom, Vivian, just gave a toast talking about how proud she is of Preston's self-made success and strong family roots. I might literally throw up on the centerpiece. I typed back quickly, hold your ground. Do not say a word yet. Wait for the signal. Reed, Preston is standing up now. He's grabbing the microphone. The crowd is getting quiet. I rolled down my window completely. The night was still and quiet enough that, beneath the ambient noise of the party, I could hear the faint, amplified booming of a microphone coming from the backyard patio. I couldn't make out the exact words through the trees, but I didn't need to. Reed was live texting the transcript like a court reporter. Reed, he's thanking Camille, saying she's the love of his life. Blah, blah, blah. Reed, now he's talking about Conrad. He's looking right at him. Reed, Everett, I swear to God. He literally just said, I want to thank my dad, my rock, for always being there for me, and for helping me secure this beautiful home to start my new family. Since Mom passed, it's just been the two of us left against the world, and it means everything. Just the two of us left. I looked at the digital clock glowing on my dashboard. It read 8:46 in the evening. I opened my email app. The draft I had prepared earlier was waiting. The recipients were locked in: Preston, Conrad, and Camille. The subject line was intentionally left blank. The body of the email was brief, clinically precise, and devoid of emotion. Preston. The residential property located at 4142 Maplewood Drive has been legally sold. The financial transaction closed and the title transferred on June 14th. The new owner has terminated your permission to occupy the premises and has given you 30 days to vacate. Attached are the finalized bill of sale, the original deed showing my sole ownership before the transfer, and the formal notice issued through the buyer's authorized counsel. I wish you both a happy marriage. Everett Whitlock. I double-checked the attachments. 3 PDF documents. The deed, the sale contract, the formal notice on Sterling Radcliffe's imposing law firm letterhead, issued under the corporate buyer's authorization. The clock ticked to 8:47 in the evening. I pressed send. I sat back heavily against the leather seat of my car and took a deep, shuddering breath. The missile had left the silo. There was no calling it back. Now I just had to watch the impact. My phone buzzed instantly. It was Reed calling. I snatched it up and answered, putting him on speakerphone, turning the volume all the way up. "I'm keeping my phone hidden in my breast pocket," Reed whispered rapidly, his voice tight with adrenaline. "Just listen. Do not say anything." Through the phone, I heard the crisp, high-fidelity ambient noise of a high-end wedding reception. Glasses were clinking, people were laughing gently, and Preston was still talking. Then the music abruptly faded down. "Wait," I heard a woman's voice say over the microphone. It was Camille. "Preston, your phone just buzzed on the table. Who is emailing you right now during our speech? Probably just spam. Babe, ignore it. Let's cut the cake." Preston's voice sounded slightly nervous, trying to project his usual effortless charm to the crowd. "It's from someone named Everett," Camille said. Her voice sharpened, losing its sweet bridal tone. "Who is Everett?" There was a heavy, suffocating pause. I could imagine the color draining from Preston's face. "Nobody," Preston said quickly, his voice tight. "Just a guy from work. Just an old colleague. Give me the phone, Camille, please." "No," Camille said sharply. I could hear the rustle of heavy silk fabric as she pulled away from him. He attached documents. "Wait. What is this?" Silence stretched over the phone line. 10 seconds. 15. It was the kind of absolute, dead silence that completely sucks the oxygen out of a room. 200 people were holding their breath. "Preston?" Camille's voice trembled, rising in pitch until it was almost a shriek. "This is a property deed. To this house. It says the sole owner before yesterday's sale was Everett Whitlock. And, oh my God, this is a formal notice from the new owner. What is going on?" Low, confused murmurs began to ripple through the massive crowd. "Let me see that phone." A sharp, incredibly authoritative voice cut through the noise like a machete. It was Vivian, Camille's mother, the terrifying matriarch of the wealthy Beaumont family. I could hear her snatch the device from her daughter's hands. "Conrad!" Vivian barked into the microphone, her voice echoing off the surrounding houses. "Get up here right now. Vivian, please. Let's not make a scene in front of our guests." Conrad's voice was placating, dripping with false confidence and panic. "It's a misunderstanding. It's a cruel prank. A scam. A scam." Vivian's voice was like a cracking whip. "This is a registered bill of sale from Sterling Radcliffe's law firm. I know Sterling Radcliffe. It says the house was sold yesterday by Everett Whitlock. Who the hell is Everett Whitlock? And why is he evicting my daughter onto the street on her wedding night?" "He's crazy," Preston shouted, his voice cracking with pure, unadulterated panic. "He's a distant, estranged cousin. He's obsessed with me. He forged this paperwork to ruin my life. That was it. That was the cue Reed had been waiting for. He's your brother." Reed's voice boomed over the crowd. He didn't have a microphone, but he didn't need one. He projected his voice with the fury of a man who had watched his best friend get abused for over a decade. I grinned fiercely in the darkness of my car. "What did you just say?" Vivian demanded, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "His name is Everett Whitlock," Reed yelled, ensuring every single one of those 200 wealthy guests heard him loud and clear. "He is Preston's younger, biological brother. And he is the man who bought this house for Preston 2 years ago with his own hard-earned money. Preston lied to you. Conrad lied to you. Everett paid for this roof. And you people wouldn't even let him in the front door tonight. Pandemonium." Utter chaos erupted through the phone speaker. Guests were gasping loudly. Whispers turned into loud arguments. Chairs scraped violently against the patio stones. "Preston, is this true?" Camille was sobbing hysterically now. "You told me you were an only child. You swore to me your dad bought this house. Camille, baby, please listen to me. I can explain." Preston pleaded, his voice breaking into a pathetic whine. "Don't you dare touch her," Vivian roared. The sound of a crystal glass shattering violently echoed loudly through the phone. "You lied about your own family? You erased your own brother? You pretended to own a home you were freeloading in? You are a pathetic, broke fraud. Vivian, please, be reasonable. Conrad tried to intervene, his voice completely stripped of its usual dominance, sounding old and weak. This is private family business. We can handle this quietly inside. Your family is a pack of liars and thieves. Vivian spat, her voice ringing with absolute finality. There is no marriage here. The wedding is over. Everyone, get out of this house. Through my windshield, I watched the heavy front double doors fly open. Vivian stormed out into the warm night air, her expensive heels clicking furiously against the stone pavement. She was physically dragging Camille by the wrist. Camille was crying hysterically, her immaculate white designer dress dragging through the grass and dirt. They marched straight to the black Rolls-Royce waiting in the driveway. The terrified valet driver leaped out, opened the rear door, and they vanished into the back seat. The massive engine roared to life, tires squealing against the asphalt, and the luxury car sped off down the street, disappearing into the night. The dominoes fell rapidly after that. Guests began pouring out of the front door in droves. There were no goodbyes. There were no hugs or well wishes. Just groups of wealthy people power-walking to their Porsches, Ferraris, and BMWs, desperate to escape the radioactive blast zone of my family's total public humiliation. I sat in my car, listening to the silence slowly return to the street. The jazz band had stopped playing. The string lights seemed dimmer. I picked up my phone, ended the call with Reed, put the car in drive, and drove home. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed in my downtown apartment. I opened my eyes, and the sunlight streaming through the heavy blinds felt different. Felt lighter, brighter, cleaner. For the first time in my entire adult life, I didn't wake up with that familiar, heavy knot of anxiety in the pit of my stomach. The knot that always wondered if I was good enough, successful enough, or rich enough for my father's approval. The knot was entirely gone. The toxic cord connecting me to them had been brutally, legally severed. I walked into the kitchen, turned on the coffee maker, and listened to it brew. My phone, sitting on the granite counter, began to vibrate at exactly 7 o'clock in the morning. The caller ID flashed Conrad's name. I poured myself a mug of black coffee, took a slow, deliberate sip, and let it ring 3 times before I finally pressed answer. "Hello, Conrad," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and devoid of any affection. "You ruined your brother's life." Conrad screamed into the receiver. His voice was ragged, completely unhinged, tearing at his vocal cords. The carefully maintained mask of the calm, wealthy, authoritative patriarch had been ripped to shreds. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Vivian canceled all the checks for the catering. "Camille's lawyers are already discussing an annulment. You publicly humiliated us in front of the entire country club. What the hell is wrong with you?" I leaned back against the counter, holding the warm mug. "I didn't humiliate you, Conrad. The truth humiliated you. I simply provided the documentation to back it up." "Undo it," he demanded, slamming his fist against a table or a wall on his end of the line. The sound made me flinch out of old habit, but I quickly recovered. "Call your lawyer right now. Stop the sale. Give the house back to Preston, and we can try to fix this mess with the Beaumont family." "The money is already sitting in my account," I replied, my voice as cold and flat as a frozen lake in winter. "The house belongs to a massive corporate holding company now. They don't care about your feelings, they don't care about Camille Beaumont, and neither do I. Your mother would be deeply ashamed of you," Conrad yelled. There it was. It was his ultimate weapon, the final guilt trip he always kept in his back pocket to force me into submission. He invoked the ghost of the woman he had betrayed to control the son he despised. My jaw locked. I gripped the phone tighter, but my voice didn't waver. "I want to put this on the record, Conrad, so listen carefully. Mother wouldn't be ashamed of me. She would be utterly disgusted by what you did to her son. She would be sickened that you stole my inheritance, my college fund, to buy Preston a car. She knew exactly what kind of monster you were, which is why she secretly made Helena my godmother. You are a thief, and you are a terrible, pathetic excuse for a father. Do not ever contact me again." I hung up the phone. I went into my settings and blocked his number. I blocked his email. I blocked him on every conceivable platform. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. It was Preston. I answered, putting it on speakerphone while I started making eggs. You have 30 days, Preston. The clock started last night. Everett, you can't do this. Preston sounded completely broken. The arrogant, untouchable golden boy was gone, replaced by a panicking, terrified child. I'll sue you. I swear to God. I'll get my own lawyer. You can't just evict me from my own home without a fight. My lawyer, Sterling Radcliffe, already sent your notice via certified mail, I said, flipping an egg in the pan. And by the way, if you try to sue, you'll need to prove to a judge that you have legal standing. You have no lease. You paid 0 rent. You have no written contract. Any lawyer who takes your case will just be stealing your money. Legally, you are a squatter. You have nothing. There was a long, pathetic silence on the line. I could hear him breathing heavily. Then, the manipulation tactic abruptly shifted. The anger vanished, replaced by a whining, begging tone that made my skin crawl with secondhand embarrassment. Everett, please, man. We're brothers. We're blood. I know I messed up. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm so sorry. Please don't do this to me. I have nowhere to go. Camille's family is threatening to sue me for fraud to recoup the wedding costs. She's threatening to end the marriage before we have even had time to file all the paperwork. My life is completely falling apart. You built your entire life on my foundation, Preston, I said quietly. You used my money, my house, and my absence to build your fake empire. And I simply decided to take my foundation back. Where am I supposed to sleep? He sobbed. Real tears. I heard Conrad has a very comfortable recliner, I replied. You can sleep on it while you figure out how to get a real job. You have 30 days to pack your boxes before the corporate buyer sends the county sheriff to physically drag you out onto the curb. Have a nice life, Preston. I ended the call. I blocked his number, too. I walked over to my laptop sitting on the dining table and opened my secure banking application. The screen loaded, and there it was. The balance. A substantial, high 6-figure number staring back at me in bold green font. Nearly $770,000 in sale proceeds, reduced only by legal fees and closing costs. I stared at the numbers until my eyes watered. It wasn't just money. It was freedom. It was a heavy, impenetrable suit of armor. It was the physical, undeniable proof that I had survived them, outsmarted them, and finally broken out of the prison they had kept me locked inside since I was a grieving teenager in an oversized suit. The brutal storm had finally passed. The toxic, suffocating debris of my family had been completely swept away by the flood. The house was gone. The fake, opulent wedding was ruined. The lies they had carefully constructed for years were exposed to the harsh light of day. And standing in the quiet, absolute peace of my own kitchen, looking out over the city that I had conquered on my own, I knew with absolute certainty that I would never, ever let anyone make me feel like a ghost in my own life again. 6 months passed. Half a year since the night the wedding completely imploded on the front lawn of the Maplewood house. Time is a strange thing. When you are trapped in a toxic family dynamic, time feels like a heavy chain dragging behind you. Every holiday, every phone call, every forced interaction feels like a grueling marathon you never signed up to run. But once you finally take a pair of bolt cutters to that chain, time suddenly feels light. It moves freely. The immediate aftermath of the eviction and the canceled wedding was like watching a slow-motion train wreck from a very safe, comfortable distance. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to make any calls, spread any rumors, or defend my actions to anyone. The truth has a remarkable way of doing its own heavy lifting, especially when there are 200 very wealthy, very angry witnesses involved. You cannot put the truth back in the bottle once it has been spilled all over the expensive hardwood floors of a high society event. Within a single week, the story had traveled through every elite circle my father and brother had spent years carefully infiltrating. The country club, the neighborhood association, Conrad's weekly golf foursome, Camille's exclusive sorority alumni network, and Preston's corporate office. The specific details varied depending on who was gossiping over their martinis, but the brutal skeleton of the story remained completely identical in every telling. The groom's younger brother bought him a massive house, got entirely erased from the family narrative, and then legally sold the house right out from under the groom on the exact night of the wedding reception. Vivian Beaumont, Camille's terrifying mother, made absolute sure the narrative stayed accurate. She told her high-end book club. She told her charity gala committee. She told anyone who would listen. Her exact words, passed along to me by Reed, were lethal. She said, "If a man can look his bride in the eye and lie about having a biological brother just to hide his own financial incompetence, what else is he capable of hiding? The Whitlock family is genetically fraudulent." That single sentence traveled through the Beaumont social circle like a raging wildfire. By the end of the month, Preston had gone from being the highly desirable, successful golden boy to the ultimate cautionary tale. He was the man every wealthy mother warned her daughters about. But the public fallout hit my father, Conrad, the absolute hardest. His entire identity, his whole rigid ego, was built on the foundation of being a highly respected, authoritative patriarch. He needed the men at the country club to look at him with admiration. He needed to be seen as the ultimate provider and the wise senior advisor. Reed's uncle was a member of the Oak Ridge Country Club, the same club Conrad had patronized for 20 years. He gave Reed the full rundown of what happened on a sunny Tuesday afternoon in the clubhouse dining room. Conrad was sitting at his usual table by the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, nursing a scotch, pretending everything was perfectly normal. He was waiting for his usual golf partners. Only one man showed up, Franklin Caldwell. Franklin was a retired district court judge, a man of intense moral clarity, and a guy who had known Conrad since I was in middle school. Franklin didn't sit down. He just stood over the table, looking down at Conrad with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. "I heard about the wedding, Conrad," Franklin said, his voice loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear clearly. Conrad tried to wave it off, offering a fake, dismissive laugh. "Oh, it was a massive misunderstanding, Franklin. Just a temporary family dispute blown entirely out of proportion by the Beaumont women. You know how dramatic they can be. Have a seat. Let's order lunch." Franklin didn't move. He crossed his arms. "I also heard about the house. I heard that your younger boy, Everett, the one you barely ever mention, was the man who actually bought that property. I heard you stood by and let Preston claim it was yours. I heard you completely froze out your own flesh and blood. The boy who put a roof over your other son's head." Conrad's face went completely rigid. The color drained from his cheeks. "Franklin, that is private family business. You don't have the full context." "I have enough context," Franklin replied coldly. "A man who treats his own son like a disposable bank account is no kind of man at all. You are a disgrace, Conrad. Lose my number. Find another foursome." Franklin turned his back and walked out of the dining room. Conrad was left sitting entirely alone, surrounded by the quiet, judging stares of the other club members. He left the restaurant before the waiter even brought the check. I heard that story secondhand, but I believe every single word of it, because Conrad quietly canceled his country club membership 2 weeks later. The men he respected the most were finally looking at him and seeing exactly what my mother saw 17 years ago. A selfish, hollow fraud. As for Preston, his descent was equally spectacular. The corporate buyer of the Maplewood house did not mess around. On day 31, a property management representative showed up with a locksmith and a county sheriff. Preston and Camille had already packed their boxes. Camille ultimately did not pursue an annulment or file for divorce, which genuinely surprised me at first. But when I heard the terms of her staying, I realized it wasn't out of deep, unconditional love. It was about control. Vivian Beaumont wanted to destroy Preston, but Camille was deeply embarrassed by the prospect of a collapsed marriage hitting the society papers. So she stayed, but she put him on a brutally short leash. They moved into a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. There was no sprawling backyard, no string lights, no marble kitchen island, and definitely no patio for a live jazz quartet. It was a massive downgrade, a stark, daily reminder of exactly what Preston had lost through his own staggering arrogance. Camille laid down absolute, non-negotiable terms. First, Preston had to sign a postnuptial agreement completely waiving any right to her family's trust fund or assets in the event of a divorce. Second, he had to submit to full, humiliating financial transparency. She demanded access to every bank account, every credit card statement, every single dollar that came in or went out. She treated him like an untrustworthy teenager with a stolen credit card. Third, she mandated intensive weekly couples therapy. No excuses, no skip sessions. Preston had to sit on a couch every Thursday evening and verbally dissect his pathological need to lie. Whether he actually followed through and learned anything from that therapy wasn't my concern anymore. I was completely divested from his character development. 3 months after the eviction, I walked down to my apartment lobby to check my mail. Mixed in with the bills and junk flyers was a thick white envelope. My name was written on the front in messy, rushed handwriting. I recognized the scrawl immediately. It was Preston's. I took the envelope back up to my kitchen, made a cup of coffee, and sat at the island. I stared at the sealed paper for a long time before I finally slid a knife under the flap. Inside were 2 pages of lined notebook paper. The handwriting was frantic, the ink slightly smudged in places. It was the handwriting of a man who was writing fast because he was absolutely terrified he would lose his nerve if he stopped to think. He didn't explicitly apologize for the past 17 years. Narcissists rarely do. But he wrote things I never thought I would see on paper. Everett, the letter began. I know I messed up. I know I destroyed everything. The apartment we live in now is tiny. Camille looks at me like I am a stranger every single morning. Her mother treats me like a criminal. Every time I try to defend myself, they bring up the deed to the Maplewood house. They bring up your name. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to get my life back to where it was. Camille keeps asking me specific questions about you, about our childhood, and I don't even know what to tell her because I realize I don't actually know you anymore. And I know that is entirely my fault. I took you for granted. I thought you would always just be there, fixing things, taking the hit. I was wrong. I read the letter twice. I absorbed the words. I let the reality of his misery wash over me. I didn't feel a triumphant rush of joy. I didn't feel the urge to call him and rub salt in the wound. I just felt a profound, quiet sense of closure. He was finally experiencing the consequences of his own actions. The protective bubble Conrad had built around him had popped. I carefully folded the 2 pages, walked into my bedroom, and placed the letter in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. I closed the drawer. I didn't write back. I didn't call him. Not because I actively hated him with a burning passion anymore, but simply because I wasn't ready. And for the very first time in my 31 years of life, I allowed "not ready" to be a complete, valid sentence. I didn't owe him my forgiveness just because he was finally uncomfortable. Conrad never reached out. No letter, no angry voicemail, no passive-aggressive messages passed through relatives. Just absolute, deafening silence. It was the exact same silence he had given me my entire childhood whenever I needed a father. Except now it was the only language he had left to speak. I didn't wait by the phone for him. I was completely done waiting for a train on a track that had been torn up a decade ago. While their lives were shrinking, mine was expanding. I had $770,000 sitting in my high-yield account. My lawyer, Anthony, advised me to dump it into a diverse index fund or buy another commercial property. From a strictly financial standpoint, he was absolutely right. But every time I looked at that massive number on my banking app, it felt heavy. Felt like blood money. It was the physical manifestation of my trauma, a refund for a childhood I could never get back. I didn't want to just invest it and watch it grow. I wanted to cleanse it. I wanted to turn poison into medicine. I called Helena. We met at Anthony's lavish downtown office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. We sat around his massive mahogany conference table. I slid a heavily researched proposal across the polished wood. Anthony put on his reading glasses, and Helena leaned in to look at the paperwork. I don't want to keep this money, I said, my voice steady and certain. I paid off the last tiny fraction of my student loans last week. My salary is more than enough to sustain my lifestyle. I want to build something with this capital. Something permanent. Helena looked down at the first page of the document. Her hand flew up to cover her mouth, and her eyes instantly filled with tears. Printed in bold black letters at the top of the page were the words, "The Evelyn Whitlock Foundation. I want to establish a scholarship and grant fund," I explained, looking at Helena. "A fund specifically designed for young adults between the ages of 18 and 24 who have lost a parent and find themselves completely cut off from financial support. Not just a standard college fund for tuition. I want this to cover the practical, terrifying things that nobody thinks about when a kid is suddenly orphaned or abandoned. I want it to cover professional licensing fees. I want it to cover first and last month's rent for their first apartment. I want it to cover emergency medical bills or the cost of a reliable used car, so they can actually get to a job interview in the freezing rain." Anthony took off his glasses and looked at me with a rare expression of genuine respect. "This is a substantial amount of seed capital, Everett. Properly managed and invested in a trust, this foundation could operate in perpetuity. We can set up a board of directors. We can ensure the disbursements are tax-exempt. I want you to handle the legal framework, Anthony," I said, "and I want Helena to be the president of the board. Nobody knew my mother's heart better than her. She knows exactly how to spot a kid who needs a real lifeline, not just a handout." Helena stood up from her leather chair, walked around the massive table, and pulled me into a fierce, bone-crushing hug. She was crying openly now, her tears soaking into the shoulder of my suit jacket. "Your mother is looking down right now, Everett," Helena whispered fiercely into my ear. "And she is so incredibly proud of the man you fought to become." We spent the next 4 hours hammering out the legal details, drafting the mission statement, and transferring the funds. We didn't issue a flashy press release. We didn't host a self-congratulatory charity gala at a country club. We didn't post anything on social media to fish for compliments. We just quietly opened a bank account, filed the government forms, and started looking for our first applicant. A month later, we wrote our very first grant check to a 19-year-old girl who had lost her mother to cancer and was working 3 minimum wage jobs just to keep a roof over her head while studying for her nursing exams. When I handed her that check, the last remaining shard of ice in my chest completely melted away. I didn't name the foundation after myself. I named it after the woman who saw 17 years into the future, the woman who made a desperate plan to protect a son she wouldn't live to raise. My mother left me a shield, and I was finally using it to protect others. My life settled into a beautiful, predictable rhythm. Thursday nights became my absolute anchor. Every single week, without fail, Helena, Reed, and I would get together for dinner. Sometimes we ate at Helena's cozy house, sometimes at my place, and sometimes at a loud, chaotic Italian restaurant downtown where the owner knew our garlic bread order by heart. Occasionally, Sterling Radcliffe would even drop by, leaving his ruthless lawyer persona at the door and telling terrible, dry jokes over glasses of red wine. We would eat, we would argue about sports, we would complain about the real estate market, and we would laugh until our ribs physically ached. We never talked about Preston. We never talked about Conrad. We never mentioned the house on Maplewood Drive. As I sat at that table, looking at the faces of the people laughing around me, I experienced a profound realization. This was my family. This was the family I was meant to have. It wasn't the family I was randomly born into by an accident of genetics. It was the family I had consciously, deliberately built. It was a family forged by loyalty, mutual respect, and genuine care. And the best part? Absolutely no one at that table ever made me prove I deserved a chair. Nobody made me buy their affection. I was enough exactly as I was. I am standing in the kitchen of my new house as I finish telling you this story. It is not a massive, sprawling colonial estate in an exclusive, gated suburb. It doesn't have a giant marble island, and it certainly doesn't have enough square footage to host a 200-person wedding reception. It's a modest, single-story, 2-bedroom craftsman house built in the late 1990s. It sits on a quiet, unassuming street lined with mature maple trees. The front porch is just barely big enough for 2 rocking chairs and a terracotta planter that I constantly forget to water. But the hardwood floors are solid. The roof doesn't leak. The morning light hits the kitchen window perfectly at 7 o'clock, casting a warm, golden glow over the countertops while I brew my coffee. Most importantly, the deed to this property is in my name. Only my name. The mortgage is completely paid off. And nobody who steps foot inside these walls has ever, or will ever, tell me that I do not belong here. The day I moved into this house, the movers stacked 24 cardboard boxes in the living room. Before I unpacked the plates, before I set up the television, before I even made the bed, I opened one specific box labeled Fragile. I reached inside and pulled out a simple, silver-plated picture frame. Inside the frame was a photograph of my mother. It was taken when she was exactly 31 years old, the exact age I am right now. She was holding me as a baby, smiling directly into the camera lens with a look of absolute, unconditional love. A look that said the world made perfect sense as long as she was holding me. I walked over to the built-in wooden shelf right beside the front door. I carefully placed the silver frame perfectly in the center. I stood back and looked at it. "I bought a house, Mom," I said to the empty, quiet room. "And this time, I bought it for myself." For the longest time, I operated under a deeply flawed, incredibly destructive definition of what love and family meant. When you grow up in a house where affection is a conditional currency, you learn the wrong lessons. I used to genuinely believe that family meant endless, agonizing sacrifice. I believed that if I just gave enough, if I gave enough of my hard-earned money, if I offered enough of my patience, if I swallowed my pride and offered enough of my silence, the people who shared my DNA would eventually wake up and see my value. I thought I could purchase my way out of being the invisible younger brother. I was wrong. I wasn't wrong about the act of giving. Giving is a beautiful thing. I was entirely wrong about who I was giving it to. People constantly ask me about the house on Maplewood Drive. They ask if I regret pressing send on that email. They ask if selling the house right out from under my own brother on his wedding night felt like a massive, triumphant victory. The honest truth? It didn't feel like winning a championship. It felt like taking off a backpack filled with 80 pounds of heavy rocks that I had been forced to carry up a mountain for 17 years. I didn't sell that house out of pure, malicious anger. Anger burns out. Anger makes you reckless. I sold that house because I fundamentally believed that I was worth more than a temporary guest room in my own life. I sold it because I realized that I deserved a permanent seat at the head of the table. Not because I used my bank account to buy the physical table, but simply because I am a human being who matters. The Whitlock family didn't break me. They tried. They took my money, they took my childhood, and they tried to take my dignity. But they failed. They were the architects of their own spectacular destruction. They built a house out of lies, and they were shocked when the actual owner showed up to collect the bricks. As I wrap up this chapter of my life with you all, I want to leave you with something real. Something you can actually take away from my chaotic journey. If there is one educational lesson, one core truth I have pulled from the wreckage of my family, it is this. A boundary is not a wall. It is a door, and you are the only person who holds the key to the lock. If you are currently trapped in a dynamic, whether it is family, a friendship, or a romantic relationship, where you are constantly the one giving, bleeding, and sacrificing, while the other person is only taking, complaining, and demanding more. If your love and your generosity are treated like a free subscription service they can cancel or ignore whenever it becomes inconvenient for them, you need to hear this. You do not need their permission to stop giving. You do not need them to finally validate your pain before you are allowed to start healing. You do not need to wait for an apology that is never, ever going to come. You have the absolute, undeniable right to pack up your emotional bags, walk out the door, and turn the lock. Protecting your peace is not a selfish act. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. You cannot pour fresh water from an empty, shattered cup. I want to hear from you now. I want you to take a moment and think about this story. What is the one perspective, the one lesson about family, money, or boundaries that resonated with you the deepest? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's create a space where we can learn from each other's scars. Or, if you simply resonated with the message and want to show your support, just drop the word good in the comments section. It lets me know that my story, and the pain it took to get here, brought some value to your day. It lets me know I am not speaking into an empty void. Thank you for spending your time with me. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you were never too much for them to handle. They were simply offering far too little. Take care of yourselves, protect your peace fiercely, and I will see you in the next video.